Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So, continuing on from the last Pursuit of the Truth, where I was talking about Bro Sanchez TV's playlist, Her Story to History. The thing I forgot to mention was in the first one, it mentioned the idea that before, that early man and woman, humans, were gatherers. They had a vegan diet, and they only ate from plants and trees and fruits and nuts and things, and didn't eat meat. And his assertion is that also animals did this as well. That all animals didn't eat meat. There were no prey predators. They were all herbivores. I did try to Google some of this. It is difficult to find. I can find sort of people talking about both sides as usual. So that doesn't really help. That's, I guess, the problem with history and science is there's no clear cut because no one was there. So people make assertions and try and back up with the evidence that they find. And of course, you can, cherry pick and do all that kind of thing to get your argument across. So yeah, it's difficult to know, but that seems like really interesting. And I know, like at first when you think about it, that seems impossible because we've all grown up seeing lions eat zebras and all that kind of thing, and obviously men eat huge amounts of meat, more than any animal alive, I would have thought. More than the fact that we have to breed them now, especially for eating. And obviously your mind, because it's been brought up in this time, it's very difficult to see back in that time, and most people are just going to say, no, that's not possible because I've seen a lion eat a zebra, thinking that, well, has that always been the way? You weren't there, so how do you know? I mean, maybe there's fossils and things like that. I know there is some fossil evidence that suggested that were herbivores, but there's also new evidence that suggests that there were carnivores as well. So and the problem is this is like 1 million years ago, so it's very difficult, or 1 million to 5 million years ago, it's difficult to get to this truth. But we do know. I mean, it's not impossible, because if you think about it, there's lots of people that managed to befriend, lions and things. There was a guy in South Africa who, used to be able to, stroke them, feed them, be in the same cage as them, as it were. And there was no problem. I know there are some people that do end up getting killed by the ones that they're okay with. So it's not impossible to think. And I know I did talk about this previously, and I can't remember what I was talking about, but this idea, could we all live together? And so there was an interesting argument that he made, that there's a possibility that once, that his assertion is that when man changed from, when man took control after women were in control, that then these men went to became hunter-gatherers, and they found animals and ate them, and then that caused other animals to do the same thing, because that created the prey-predator, whereas previously everyone was living together. And the assertion is that in the pre-dynasties after the ancient Greeks, that things like the Bible had to give us it's okay to eat animals, because it mentions in the Bible about animals being there for our sustenance. I think it also mentioned in the Quran. But the assertion is that was put in there to make it okay for us to do this. I mean, it is all possible. The thing is it's easy to just say, oh no, because all these other scientists say that it can't be. But no one was there. No one can actually go back in a TARDIS and find out. If only we could, and then we could say. And then people still wouldn't believe it, unless you could bring back some kind of evidence, or everyone went to go and see it. So then I was noticing on Netflix, there was a show called Ancient Apocalypse with Graham Hancock, which I find it a little bit dubious by his manner. He seems very like he says he is a journalist. And I know he's had a lot of slack for his views of suggesting, similar to Bro Sanchez TV, that that the recorded history of civilization beginning at 3,000 to 4,000 BC is wrong, and that early man or women, humans, whatever you want to call them, from as far back as 10 to 20,000 BC, were civilized, were able to build these structures, because he goes around looking at these different pyramids and things. Some of it is, like the first episode, he definitely shows this pyramid and they bore down, but there's a lot of, the problem is there's no there's an assertion, and they do a little bits of experiments, but they never like there's these chambers that he claims are inside underneath, but there's no like boring to go and to excavate and find that out. Really he needs to raise money or ask the people in those countries that also believe him to do that, to find that out, because maybe if they bore down into those areas they will find artifacts. At the moment it's just an assertion, and of course most scientists or researchers or historians aren't going to believe that because they've got this fixed view, and this is the problem. And I was surprised because I was looking at Graham Hancock on YouTube just now, and he was like, it claims this video debunks flat earth in 42 seconds, and he chuckles on it, and it's a bit surprising because you'd think a man who's railing against the idea of what you've been told being the truth, and you finding out things that question that, his mind would be a little bit more open to sort of thinking, well, wait a minute, I know that every water I've ever seen is always level, and therefore how do you explain this curve? And he's talking about to explain it, just go and stand on a mountain and watch a boat come towards you, over the curve, as if the curve is, for the curve to work, it has to be a certain distance. And obviously your eyes have things, and your eyes do raise things up towards you because that's how your eyes work, because when distance comes in. So that argument is actually false with your eyes. If he zoomed in with his camera, he probably would still see it on flat and not rising up over the curve, as if anyone has ever seen anything rise over the curve. Like the curve is only like from to the horizon, and then it just goes over, and then that's the curve. The earth is that small that the curve is there. It's just, I found it, that's made me sort of think that how can someone who is questioning things that that everyone says no, I'm surprised that he wasn't more open to thinking. He says, and he sort of says, well, even if it was flat, what's the point? Well, yeah, okay, I mean, I get it, it doesn't actually change anything on Earth, but it would mean that we're being not told the truth, and there may be other things that would lead to, and also from the fact of, for himself, you could pose that question to him. What does it matter, whether humans were civilized before 4000 BC, which has made his whole career over, and he gets debunked by historians about and criticized, and lots of videos on YouTube sort of suggesting that he's crazy or whatever. And you could ask him the same thing. What does it matter, Graham, if civilization did exist? That was ages ago. Well, to him it obviously matters, doesn't it? And I'm sure to a lot of flat earthers it matters to them as well that they're being told the truth, because that's the thing. What's the lie for? If you believe in flat earth, what's the lie for? To keep us in, it's to hide maybe creation. And he talks about, Egyptians used to know that the earth was, the globe or whatever. But there's lots of religious texts, including the Bible, including the Quran. And I read one out the other day where it shows that they actually did believe it was flat earth. In the Bible it mentions the dome and flat earth, and in the Quran it mentions the earth is like a carpet rolled out. Obviously there's no carpet that is other than square and flat, rectangle or whatever. There's no round carpet or blanket or whatever the description is. So it is a bit strange that he poo-pooed it that quickly. It makes me very dubious about him, but it is interesting, these things, to suggest, to look back. Well, the important thing isn't actually the whether it's flat earth, whether it's ancient civilizations, how we got here, whether it was aliens, whether, we just evolved like that, whether Darwin and all that kind of stuff. Whatever, the important thing is that we strive, the pursuit of truth. We strive to get to the truth, and we don't let ourselves get stopped just because one person said, as we all know, every historian, every scientist, every human, every person involved in medicine, even anything, we all know that if you go back 100 years ago and asked a person something, they would tell you this, and everyone will believe it. And then someone else comes along and disproves that or improves upon it, and it's slightly tweaked. We know that happens all the time, especially in science and history. We all know with history, the idea of it's written by the victors, there were, because I was thinking why would anyone, because in Bro Sanchez he talks about destroying the cultures and, you know, whatever, and then I was thinking, why would anyone do that? But we all know that, like in the Graham Hancock thing, it mentions the conquistadors, that they went to somewhere and they destroyed all the stuff because they didn't want people to know that. We also know that, like the Romans, when it came to Christianity, what, you know, was alleged to have been done there to try and get rid of it, you know, and was it Moses and the babies and the, you know, trying to get rid of these things, these people, these stories, these, you know, whatever. And yeah, it's very interesting because the thing is, like, there's lots of myths and lots of things. And one thing I noticed in the Graham Hancock, which made me think, was also this idea that I noticed in the creation stories. A lot of them mention the flood, and obviously we all, scientists believe there was a was it about 10,000 BC or 11,000 BC. There was an ice age, and that possibly is the Great Flood that the Bible and other religious texts that I mentioned in the creation story in the previous one were talking about. That there was, you know, the Great Flood was actually the Ice Age. When the Ice Age happened, maybe the ice caps melted, it flooded the earth. Most people got destroyed except ones who were clever enough to work out to get to high ground, or they had already built things like an ark, or like these pyramids that in Graham Hancock's Ancient Explorer, Ancient Apocalypse, he shows lots of pyramids brought, you know, on very high up on mountain tops of mountains and things. Maybe this was because they knew the flood was coming, because, you know, like us, we prepare for things because we know of climate change. Maybe climate change is just a natural progression of these. I assume the same water is on Earth as it's always been. Sometimes it's ice, sometimes it's water, and we maybe go through that process depending on, I don't know what factors. Maybe there are man-made factors that make a difference. But it was very interesting, and I think anyone who's really trying to find truth needs to always have an open mind, because you don't know, is it? Like, I can't say with 100% that there were civilizations that were, you know, because the problem is we're all brought up on Darwin, and we're taught this at school, this idea of cavemen, and then suddenly the missing link, and then suddenly civilization in 3000 to 4000 BC, when the ancient Greeks and Egyptians came along with their pharaohs and building pyramids and all that kind of stuff, and that's where we all talk about. But of course, so because of that Darwin idea of man coming from ape, we don't know where man came from. That's his assertion. He's never found that missing link to prove man to ape, but everyone believes it as a fact, whereas it's actually a theory that still has not been proven. Obviously, the Bible and other religious texts counter that and say, no, that's not the way it is. So until someone actually proves it, finds that link, of course, that's millions of years ago, but because we have that perception, whether we believe it or not, we have that perception that anything before Egyptians were like cavemen, stone men that couldn't do anything. But we know there's lots of architecture, lots of art, lots of paintings, lots of statues that show that they were very, you know, artistic. You know, you see these models, these things, you know, and they show that, you know, do we believe that man was, that, you know, why isn't it that humans could have been maybe like us at the very beginning, able to grow? You know, like a child knows nothing, isn't it? Every child knows nothing. We start from zero, every single one of us. And the assertion would be that because your parents are more clever, that somehow they can make you more clever than, say, someone born 10,000 years ago. But maybe not, because, you know, back in those days, they knew how to plant things. They knew how to live, you know, the good life, as it were. Planting seeds, living, sustaining their own life with freedom and all that kind of stuff. They knew maybe how to communicate with each other. They had their own languages. We know from the previous one that you know, all languages go back to Africa, and there's lots of bits that are borrowed from them that show that there was probably one language, and that language is years old. So there's no reason to think that, you know, we were these apes, you know, these ape-kind men who were just like that. That's your perception, but the fact is it true? And that's what I mean. Whether you're a flat earther or you're a historian or whatever, you've been an ancient, whatever you believe in, you have to always keep, if you're looking at these things, you have to keep an open mind. Well, everyone should. And you shouldn't let, just because someone tells you or someone's written down that, oh, this is how it was, as if, wait a minute, the person who wrote it down, did they actually go back to that time and were able to validate that? They've used they found something, they've done some kind of science that, time, trying to find out how old things are. What if these things don't actually work? What if they're not that accurate? That whatever the basis of, looking at bits of, these sediments to try and work out which years they come from. What if that initial thing was wrong? So you always have to keep an open eye if you want to find the truth. Otherwise, you're just going to always be at the mercy of other people that tell you this is what the truth is. And then you're not going to find the truth. Obviously you don't just let your brain fall out of your ear. I'm not saying that, but you have to be willing to sort of say, well, wait a minute, I've been told this, but wait a minute, is it possible that, there could have been people before us that were as civilized as the ancient Egyptians, or even us, or were more than us back then in those days? And that's how they knew how to build pyramids, that everyone says, like, how was that possible back then? How did they possibly do that? Maybe because they were a lot more technologically advanced. Maybe we've repeated ourselves. Because if we humans have been around for 1 to 5 million years, if you think it's taken from 3,000 years BC to now, which is 2022 AD, which is, what is that, 6 to 7,000 years. If it took 6 to 7,000 years for people to build, pyramids and now to building cars and aeroplanes and spaceships, well, that's only 7,000 years. What if, before the Ice Age, before the Great Flood, as the evidence supports that humans were around maybe 1 to 5 million years ago. Well, from that 1 million years, 7,000, easily they could have got to the same thing. Everything got destroyed. Or maybe they didn't even bother to build cars and planes and all these things because they had other ways of travelling. Because because I suppose people would say, well, where's the remnants? Where's these fragments? And I suppose it depends how good the Ice Age and the Flood was, whether it could destroy everything. Maybe we weren't so big back then. We were just all living together in Africa, one tribe, and we didn't need cars and aeroplanes because we all lived and sustained off the land, and there was no need for these things. Because are we any more civilized or freer now, the way we live, where people are dying and starving and, we don't care about each other? So it's not impossible to think 7,000 years. Even if you say it's 10,000 years to get from just before the pyramids, the Egyptians, to now, 10,000 years. Well, in 1 million years, that 10,000 years could have appeared so many times. I guess it would be naive to us to think that we were the only ones that are like this, because what may happen is climate change is coming, as you know, if it is coming, sorry, I should say, and say that, the majority of humans are wiped off and there's only a few left. And they decide, wait a minute, I don't want to live this life that we lived anymore, where we were slaves to working and etc. So I'm not going to tell my children how we were. I'm going to start again, like any, truther probably would. You don't want to go back to the way we were. Who would want to go back to the way we were if we had a chance to be better? So you would tell your children, let's, because you'd have to do the good life again. You'd have to, rely on yourself and what you know to doing, like building with bricks and, start back at the beginning. And then, they could go on 7,000 years and get to building cars and spaceships and etc. and think they were the only ones and think that, well, and then someone finds the Statue of Liberty in the sand, like Planet of the Apes, so I don't know. But it's very interesting. And in honesty to now, none of it really matters. What really matters is that we find a way for us all to live a better life than we're living now, where we're not living in harmony with each other, with the earth, and with humanity suffering all the time in many of these pursuits of truth that I've mentioned, that with your own eyes and your own heart. If you're truthful and honest, you can see that the way we're living is even in the one country that you're in, if you could ask everyone, unless you're rich or wealthy, that 1%, your life is at the mercy of others, and you don't have the ability to do all the things that were given to you freely, that we all found freely here, if that was the case. Take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.